Hello, happy Wednesday, everybody. Today we're starting our new unit on exponents. Before we start, we're going to give a couple of shout outs. Let's see, so our first shout out we'll give to Myra. She's the only one in her class willing to put up with her table, and we appreciate that, and all the great artwork. Shout out to Jake. We miss our Furbo, our little doggy time. And then a shout out to the trio of Jasmine, Sarah, and Janitza. We miss our lunches together. Our goal for today is that you can identify base, exponent, and standard form, that you'll know the properties of 10, that you'll know the special power properties of 0 and 1, and that you can solve equations with x squareds and x cubes algebraically. So let's get started. Alright, so when you see an exponent, you might see something like 3 squared or x squared. The large number can be a number, it could be actually a variable, and then you have your powers. Our larger number is called the base, whether it's a variable or a number, and the smaller number, written in superscript, is the power. And exponents are just a way to write out an expanded multiplication problem. So for example, in exponential form, if you saw 4 cubed, or 4 to the third power, the base number is 4, that's the larger number. The power is the 3. And what this actually tells you to do is to take a 4 and multiply by itself 3 times. So you're taking 3 4s and multiplying. 4 times 4 times 4 would be 64, and that's what we call standard form. Standard form is when you say what it equals. For our next example, we need to be careful because we have parentheses, and when you have parentheses, the whole number in parentheses is your base, and you'll see why that'll be important soon. But the base number in this case is -2. The power is 5. So what this is asking us to do is to take -2 5 times and multiply it. So I'm going to do -2 times -2 and get 4. Times -2 is -8. Times -2 is 16. Times -2 is -32. I knew the answer was going to be negative because I have a negative number being multiplied 5 times. And that if you have an odd number, you're going to get a negative answer. 3/4 is second again. 3/4 is the number that's in parentheses, and the power is outside the parentheses. So the base is 3/4. The power is 2. So we're doing 3/4 times 3/4, and you're multiplying straight across and getting 9/16 for your answer. Our next example, there aren't parentheses. You have -3 to the 4th power. The power, though, because there's no parentheses, is only attached to the number 3. Order of operations says to do powers before you do subtraction. So in this case, our base is just the 3. This is the trickiest thing that we'll be doing. So the base is 3, the power is 4. This problem is telling us to put the negative on the outside and then take 3 and multiply it by itself 4 times. So we're going to do inside and get 81, and then we're going to make it negative because the negative is not attached to the power. For our next couple of examples, we have our standard form, and we're going to try to figure out what the other pieces had to be to make it work. So if the answer was 100 and our base was 10, we're being asked 10 to what power would give you 100, and that would be the second power, because 10 times 10 equals 100. Now we have the answer is 9, and we know that it was some number raised to the second power. The number was 3, because 3 squared, or 3 times 3 equals 9. The next example, our answer is 1. Our power is 7, so we want to know what number times itself 7 times will equal 1, and that has to be a 1. So 1 to the 7th is 1. Our last example, if we read it as in exponents, it would be x to the 5th, which would be telling us to take x and multiply by itself 5 times. Because we don't know what x is, we can't do anything besides write x to the 5th power. If we knew what x was, we could substitute, but we don't. So now for our next couple of charts, we're going to fill in the powers of 10 first, because there are some tricks with the powers of 10 that are good for you to know. And we'll start with 10 squared, because we've already filled that out in the chart. 10 squared we said was 100, and most of you knew that to begin with. If we're doing 10 cubed, that's 10 times 10 times 10. That would be 1,000. 10 to the 4th would be 10 times 10 times 10 times 10, which would end up being a 1 with 4 zeros. There's a neat trick with the tens that if you're doing 10 to any power, it's a 1 with that many zeros. So 10 to the 3rd is a 1 with 3 zeros. 10 to the 2nd is a 1 with 2 zeros. 10 to the 1st is a 1 with 1 zero. 10 to the 0 is a 1 with no zeros. When we get to negatives, instead of doing zeros, you're going to look at one other pattern that's in the chart. As we go up this chart, we multiply by 10 each time. When you're going down the chart, you're dividing by 10 each time. 10,000 divided by 10, 1,000 divided by 10, 100 divided by 10. So if we want to get to 10 to the negative first, we're going to take 1 and divide it by 10, which would be 1/10, or 0.1 as a decimal. If we divide that by 10, we would get 1/100th, or 0.01. 1/1000th, or 0.001. So this is a 1 with 3 zeros, but it has a 1 on top of it because it's negative. So negative powers aren't negative numbers. They are just smaller and smaller and smaller decimals. Any number to the 0 power, so if we look at our chart, 10 to the 0 power is 1. Any number to the 0 power is 1. That's a rule that you'll memorize, but if you know this pattern, it will be easy for you to fill this in. Any number to the 1st power is itself. So 10 to the 1st power was 10. 17 to the 0 power, anything to the 0 power, no matter how big or small, is the number 1. 8 to the 1st power, any number to the 1st power is itself because you only have one of those numbers. And then any number to the 0 power, no matter how big or small, is 1. Now if we get down to the next section, when you're using a calculator, there are certain buttons, depending on what calculator you're using, that will help you figure things out. So if we asked you to do 3 to the 15th power, we don't want you to do that out in your head or out on paper. We want you to use a calculator. Some calculators use this caret symbol, so you would type in 3 caret 15, and it would give you your answer. Some calculators have an XY button, so you would type in 3 XY 15. And then some have an AB button, so you would type in 3, the AB button, and then 15. So the buttons that you'll be using on calculators, depending on which calculator you have, are these buttons. So to solve equations that have squares and cubes in it, you're always going to leave unsquaring and uncubing for the very last step. So for this one, it just says x squared equals 49. So we want to know what number times itself twice will give us 49. When you're solving an equation, if there's two answers, a positive and negative, you have to give both. So for this one, I would get x equals positive or negative 7. I could write it like this, or I could just write 7, negative 7, or 7 and negative 7. For this one, I'm looking for x cubed equals 216. I want to know what number times itself 3 times will give me 216. The only number that will do that is the number 6. For these other examples, we have some steps to do first. So I'm going to draw my line. For this one, I want to get x squared by itself, so I have to get rid of this multiply by 3. I'm going to divide both sides by 3. So I will have x squared equals 36. Now I'm going to unsquare both sides, and I'm going to get x equals positive or negative 6. My next example, if I draw the line, I want to get rid of the 1/2. If you have a fraction with the variable, you multiply by the reciprocal. So I'm going to multiply by 2 on both sides to get rid of the 1/2. So I will have x cubed equals 64. So now I want to do the cube root of x cubed and the cube root of 64. And I get x equals 4, because 4 times 4 times 4 is 64. My last example, if I draw my line, I want to send over the negative 8 as a positive 8. So I'm going to have 2x squared equals 72. Now I'm going to divide by 2. So I have x squared equals 36. And now I'm going to unsquare both sides. And if I unsquare 36, I get x equals 6 or negative 6, or plus minus 6, however you want to write it. So it's good to know your perfect cubes and squares to be able to solve equations with square roots quickly. The square root of 1 is 1, square root of 4 is 2, square root of 9 is 3, square root of 16 is 4, square root of 25 is 5, square root of 36 is 6, square root of 49 is 7, square root of 64 is 8, square root of 81 is 9, 100 is 10, 121 is 11, and 144 is 12. Now for our perfect cubes, the cube root of 1 is 1, 8 is 2, 27 is 3, 64 is 4, 125 is 5, 216 is 6, 343 is 7, 512 is 8, 729 is 9, and 1000 is 10. So if you know those, that will help you. Now we're going to end with a riddle that if you can answer on today's Google form, you'll be entered into this week's Amazon raffle. Last week we had 3 winners, Alora, Victoria, and Sarah. So let's see how many people can be entered this week. Mr. and Mrs. Ashland have 6 boys. Each boy has 1 sister. How many people are in the family? Answer it on this week's Google form. If you're correct, then you'll be entered to the raffle, and the winner will be drawn during Friday's Zoom office hours. Have a good day.